Hello, my name is Rick and welcome to my YouTube channel. On this channel I tend to review products that are under $25, so if that appeals to you in any way, I'd recommend subscribing below and following me on my Instagram at rickskin_. I always forget these glasses. But today I have a review on Biossance. I never thought I'd be reviewing Biossance on my channel just because I'm too poor to pay attention to that, but yeah, their prices, there's like a moisturizer for like ranges from $50 to $70, so it was like never on my radar. But the reason why I am talking about them is because lately I've seen YouTube videos recommended to me about some content they've been creating in order to inform their following about the clean beauty and sustainability movements that we're seeing a lot more now in the cosmetics industry. And they've even recruited Jonathan Van Ness, who, if you didn't know, is a star on the show, Netflix show Queer Eye. And they're basically having him kind of act as an ambassador and a mediator to interview industry professionals to relay information about both movements. So first, I'm not trying to talk bad about Biossance, they're just kind of providing me an opportunity to talk about the way the clean beauty movement and being sustainable, how those concepts are kind of being appropriated and conflated. So I'm mainly kind of talking about the movement, not necessarily Biossance as a brand, even though they are kind of an integral part of how the knowledge of these movements are being spread. But just a little bit about Biossance so you don't think I'm just literally just talking shit about them. They're a really progressive brand. They're a female, they have a female CEO, you know, they work with a lot of charities. Their philosophy when creating their skincare products is good, just some things can kind of get misconstrued or kind of pushed alongside, and that's mainly what I'm going to talk about today. And this specific scenario is something I'm really critical of, especially from a big brand like this, just because I'm like, if you're gonna, you know, invest all this into creating all of this awareness and to kind of like, you know, make your brand look good and conscious of what's going on, like the information you should be spreading should be right. It should be thoroughly researched, and the fact that you charge so much for your products kind of, I don't know, all of it together just makes me think like everything better be right. So now I'm going to get into some of the problems I have with some of the content they've released. So Biossance released a few videos using Jonathan Van Ness as kind of a mediator to guide the conversation surrounding clean beauty and sustainability. And in the first video, it's centered on sustainability, and I agree on pretty much everything that was said in that video. There's just a few things that I'm being picky about that I think need to be kind of cleared up more. So in the first video about sustainability, they liken sustainability to consciousness, and that consciousness is leading a lifestyle that reduces waste and picking products from brands which practice ethical sourcing, which obviously is a good thing. But I feel like the term sustainability is made more ambiguous than it needs to be, and it sometimes makes people maybe feel like it's something not as attainable as it really is. So the meaning of sustainable is in the root word sustain, and that just basically means, you know, choosing ingredients that are not depleting the earth of its resources, something that's renewable, something that we are not going to run out of, that's damaging any of the surrounding environment where it's taken from. So a really basic definition of sustainability is leading a lifestyle that helps with the preservation and renewing of the resources that you're using. I personally just feel like it gets conflated a lot, so I just kind of wanted to clear that up. It's nothing necessarily bad. Okay, this next video about clean beauty, this is the one that I mainly had problems with. Because the term clean beauty is thrown around, like people act like all high and mighty, that like, my stuff doesn't have this, my stuff doesn't have this, why aren't you using this? And then most of it's kind of bullshit to me, to be honest. So in the video they go over harmful ingredients, and one of the ones they go through is SLS, or sodium lauryl sulfate. And they go over how SLS has kind of been deemed like harsh and bad for the environment, but if you actually look at the research, SLS has not been known to bioaccumulate, basically meaning that it degrades enough to the point to where it actually won't affect the environment. And by the time it actually goes down like your drain, like when you wash your face or use any product with it, it degrades to the point to where it almost has no effect on like marine life. So that's something that's not necessarily true. Also, most studies that go over the toxicity of SLS are using it in its native form and not in a carefully formulated cosmetic product where there's a lot of buffers in there to kind of lessen the harshness of the ingredient. And I'm not saying that there's poorly formulated products with SLS in it that are stripping and that could potentially be bad for the environment, but only talking about the negatives isn't telling the whole story. And then they go over sunscreen. So I've already done a video talking about sunscreen and what the research up till now has discovered. So if you'd like to see like a longer, more dedicated, in-depth video about sunscreens, in which I also review really popular sunscreens right now, you can click on the little eye thing. So first in the video, they compare chemical and physical sunscreens, and they basically start talking about how chemical sunscreens affect the environment. One of the first things she says is that chemical sunscreens are wiping out the coral reefs. And what the research is actually saying up till now is that sunscreens actually have almost a negligible effect on coral reefs. They do have an effect, but it's nothing like what people are making it. So basically, sunscreens only have an effect in high tourist traffic areas, so basically like vacation destinations and stuff like that, where there's a high concentration of people going into the water with sunscreen on. That's where we see most of the effect, the negative effect from chemical sunscreens. A lot of scientists actually believe that this whole sunscreen fiasco is actually distracting from the real problem. The main culprits that have been found to contribute to the bleaching of the coral reefs is the acidification of the ocean and global warming. So saying that chemical sunscreens are wiping out the coral reefs is a blatant over-exaggeration, on top of the fact that some physical sunscreens like zinc oxide have actually been shown to have more detrimental effects to coral reefs than some chemical ones. So that's also not true. It's also stated in that video that physical sunscreens reflect UV light and that chemical sunscreens absorb it, and that's also not true, because physical sunscreens do actually absorb a lot of the UV rays and then emit it as heat energy similar to chemical sunscreens. Physical sunscreens do have a little bit of reflecting power, but they almost work in the same way as chemical sunscreens. The main difference is that physical sunscreens kind of do sit atop the skin a little more, whereas chemical UV filters do sink in. In the video, she also says that physical sunscreens make it impossible for the sun to reach you when you're using a physical sunscreen, and that's also not true, because even an SPF of 50 only protects you from 98% of UV rays, on top of the fact that most people don't even use enough sunscreen to actually reach the SPF on the label of the bottle. So those are just some of the myths that they went over in terms of talking about clean beauty, which kind of demonizes chemical sunscreens. I wouldn't believe it. You can keep using your chemical sunscreens. They're not going to cause disastrous effects. The way you can really help the environment is by reducing your carbon footprint, thereby reducing the amount of airborne carbon dioxide, which contributes to the acidification of the oceans and global warming. In another video featuring a representative from the EWG, they then talk about parabens and how they've been shown to cause cancer and that they're endocrine disruptors. But most of the research on that has actually been kind of inconclusive and inconsistent, and there hasn't been a causal link formed yet between parabens and cancer/endocrine disruption. They also talk about fragrance for a little while, which I found kind of interesting because Biossance has fragrance in some of their products. But it's neither here nor there, I guess. And I looked at some of the references the EWG used to gather the thoughts about parabens, and I actually saw that a few of the references were appropriated in that certain keywords were highlighted from the articles, and then those were kind of put on blast to kind of emphasize the negative effects of parabens. So I'm not sure how accurate their rating scheme is. If you want kind of more trusted rating kind of ingredient analysis websites, I'd trust Paula's Choice. And there's another website I use a lot called INCI Decoder. I use those all the time to look up ingredients, or like if I'm doing an ingredient analysis, I'll go to them usually. So those are some other resources. I kind of use EWG as more of like a baseline. Of course, I would always recommend looking up on Google Scholar, looking up peer-reviewed academic journals on some ingredients. That way you're not just taking it at face value, and making sure that you're actually able to interpret what those studies are saying. Because I've also seen a lot of people kind of like on YouTube, or like people who are getting into skincare, just throwing around articles and then only like reading like the abstract or something, and that's not enough. You got to go to the results section, you got to go to the discussion section and actually be able to interpret those statistics. My third kind of problem is that they kind of contribute to the demonization of the word chemical. And you know, you've seen it kind of through a lot of skincare YouTubers who have an idea of what they're talking about. Chemical just describes something that has constant chemical composition, and chemicals are everywhere. Water is a chemical because it's all oxygen binded to 2 hydrogen atoms, and that's the only thing in it, which makes it a constant chemical composition, which makes it a chemical. And the term clean beauty, when you label something as clean, you kind of imply that everything else is dirty. The word chemical has been kind of given a negative connotation, and clean beauty has been glorified, and it's become a tool to kind of take advantage of maybe the less informed, to kind of steer them into the direction of certain products. And it truly comes down to just being a marketing scheme that exploits those who may be less informed, and that isn't right to me because it further contributes to the spread of false information. If you liked this video and you'd like to see more like it, I'm kidding. So I know I have a lot of problems with this campaign in that it kind of contributes to fear-mongering. Fear-mongering is used kind of when there's a lot of ambiguity surrounding a certain subject that kind of radicalizes people into following a certain idea, and it's really a dirty tactic to me. I don't like seeing it done. But even though there's a lot of things kind of wrong to me with this campaign, Biossance does do a lot of good. For example, I talked about it in the beginning. They contribute to charities and foundations which seek to end child abuse, to get rid of the glass ceiling for women in STEM, to rehabilitate cancer survivors, and to help eradicate diseases in underrepresented or poverty-stricken areas. They're also headed by a female CEO, which obviously is progressive in the way of equal rights and equal pay for women. So there's a lot to praise, there's a lot to not praise. That's with every brand, and you know, I applaud the effort at least. And you may have noticed that I didn't talk about really any of their products in relation to this campaign. And that's because they don't really feature them at all, which I found kind of confusing. I guess I like the fact that they're trying to make clean beauty and sustainability the star of their content, and not trying to like then be like, be clean, be like sustainable, here's our product. Like, I can understand that aspect of it, but I don't know, I'm kind of like, how do you justify yourself being kind of like a mogul in this movement, and then not kind of like feature any of the ways that you're yourself kind of, through your brand, through your products, through your innovation, supporting these movements, you know? Or at least explicitly stating it. It's like, as a brand, they're trying to kind of navigate 2 different initiatives, which is like, obviously, as every brand is trying to sell product, and then trying to do this clean sustainability thing, and I just feel like both aren't being taken care of as well as they could be. So yeah. That's really all I had to say about it. If you like this video and you'd like to see more like it, I'd recommend you'd subscribe below and follow me on my Instagram at rickskin_, where I post texture shots, mini reviews, and updates for this channel. And I hope you liked this video, and I'd love to see you in the next one. Bye bye.